The crystal towers of Nexus Prime stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the largest tower, the emergency council meeting was about to begin. Representatives from 50 different worlds sat around the massive circular table, their various forms creating a rainbow of alien shapes and colors. Ambassador Taiho slammed his blue, scaly hand on the table. His bright scales flickered with anger as he looked around the room. The tall, lizard-like Fortani had always been known for their temper, but today he was more upset than usual. "This is impossible," he shouted, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "They cannot just leave. Humans have been part of the galaxy for 300 years. Across the table, Do Hyun adjusted his breathing mask. The small gray Zelani needed special air to survive, but his mind was sharp with numbers. He had been calculating for hours and the results scared him. "If the humans leave," Do Hyun said in his quiet voice, 60% of our shipping will stop. Almost half of our factories will close. Our trade routes will collapse. Other representatives began talking all at once. Some were angry, some were scared, and some were confused. The noise grew louder and louder until a single human voice cut through the chaos. "Please, everyone be quiet." Ambassador Hyojin stood at her podium near the center of the room. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, with black hair tied back and tired eyes. She had been Earth's voice in the galaxy for 20 years. Today would be her last day. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what was coming, but nobody wanted to hear it. "Earth has made its final decision," Hyojin said. Her voice was calm but firm. "We are leaving the Galactic Federation. All human colonies will be brought home within 1 year. All trade deals are ended. All technology sharing stops today." The silence stretched on for long seconds. Then the room exploded with voices again. "You cannot do this to us," screamed Senator Kyung-soo, a tall insect-like creature from the outer rim. "We have contracts. We have agreements." Hyojin raised her hand. "All contracts include the standard withdrawal clause. We are following galactic law." "But why?" asked General Won-shik, the military leader of the Corvani Defense Fleet. His purple skin was dark with concern. "What have we done wrong?" Hyojin looked around the room at faces she had known for decades. Some of these aliens were her friends. Some had worked with her on important projects, but friendship and business were different things. "For 50 years, she said, "we have asked for equal treatment in this council. Our proposals are always voted down. Our ideas are stolen and used without credit. When we ask for help, you tell us to solve our own problems. When you need help, you expect us to drop everything and come running." "But that is how things work," said Ambassador Yunji, a floating energy being from the core worlds. "Everyone contributes what they do best." "What we do best is everything," Hyojin replied. "Look around this room. Who designed the translation system that lets us all understand each other? Humans. Who created the shipping schedules that keep goods moving between worlds? Humans. Who solved the quantum math that makes faster than light travel safe? Humans." Do Hyun checked his numbers again. "Ambassador Hyojin is correct. Humans control most galactic infrastructure." "Because you are good at it," Taeho said. "Why is this a problem?" Hyojin smiled sadly. "Because you never learned to do it yourselves. You just assumed we would always be here to do it for you." She pressed a button on her podium and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed trade routes, shipping lanes, and manufacturing centers across the galaxy. Green dots marked human-controlled operations. The display was mostly green. "This is what happens when we leave," Hyojin said. She pressed another button, and all the green dots turned red. Red means stopped. Red means broken. Red means you will have to figure it out yourselves. The room was quiet again. Representatives stared at the display, counting the red dots. There were thousands of them. "How long do we have?" asked Admiral Jamin, commander of the Second Fleet. "Human personnel. We'll begin leaving immediately," Hyojin answered. "Essential services will be maintained for 6 months to give you time to prepare. After that, you are on your own." "This is madness," whispered Minister So Young from the agricultural worlds. Half our food comes through human shipping networks. Then, you should learn to ship it yourselves, Hyejin said. She gathered her papers and stood up. I want you to know that this decision was not made in anger. It was made in hope. Hope? Taeho's scales were flashing bright red now. Hope for what? Hope that someday you will grow up, Hyejin said. Hope that someday we can be real partners instead of your universal problem solvers. Hope that when we meet again, it will be as equals. She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the silent room. At the door, she turned back one last time. Earth's final message to the galaxy is simple, she said. Learn to stand on your own feet. We will be watching. When you are ready to treat us as equals instead of servants, call us. We might answer. The door closed behind her with a soft click. For several minutes, nobody spoke. The holographic display still showed thousands of red dots scattered across the galaxy. Each dot represented something that would soon stop working. What do we do, now? Asked Do-hyun. Taeho stared at the empty space where Hyejin had been standing. I suppose we learn to fix things ourselves. Do we even know how? So Young asked. The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Nobody wanted to answer it, because they all knew the truth. They had no idea how to do what humans did. They had never needed to know. Admiral Jaemin stood up slowly. I suggest we start with emergency planning. We have 6 months before the humans stop helping us. We need to use that time wisely. But as the representatives began to file out of the Crystal Tower, each one carrying the weight of an impossible task, they all wondered the same thing. How do you replace 300 years of human innovation in 6 months? Outside, Hyejin's ship lifted off from the landing pad and headed toward the stars. Soon she would be home on Earth, and this beautiful, chaotic, impossible galaxy would have to learn to survive without humanity. The great experiment was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the humans announced they were leaving. Captain Jaemin stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the main screen with growing alarm. 3 major trade routes had simply stopped working. Ships were getting lost. Cargo was disappearing and nobody knew how to fix it. Captain, his navigation officer So Young called from her station. The Kepler jump gate is showing error codes again. That's the 5th one this week. Jaemin rubbed his purple forehead. The Corvani were supposed to be master engineers, but they had never worked on jump gates before. Humans had always handled that. Can we repair it? He asked. I don't know how, So Young admitted. The instruction manuals are all in human languages and the technical terms don't translate properly. On the industrial world of New Factory, Supervisor Kyung-soo watched his production lines shut down one by one. The machines were incredibly complex, with thousands of moving parts and delicate sensors. When they worked, they could build anything. When they broke, they were just expensive metal sculptures. The protein synthesizer is offline again, his assistant Minho reported. Same error as yesterday. Kyung-soo sighed. Did you try the reset procedure? 5 times. It keeps saying human authorization required for advanced repairs. The bug-like supervisor looked out over his factory floor. Half the machines were dark and silent. The other half were working, but for how long? Every day something new broke down. Every day they fell further behind their production goals. Sir, Minho said quietly, maybe we should contact the humans. Ask them to come back and fix this. They won't answer, Kyung-soo replied. I tried yesterday. The message just bounces back with an auto-reply saying, service no longer available. Meanwhile, on Sigma Station, the biggest trading post in the sector, Merchant Captain Yoon-ji was making the discovery of her lifetime. In her cargo hold sat 50 crates of real earth coffee and chocolate. 6 months ago, these items had been common luxury goods. Now they were worth more than gold. How much? The Zilani buyer asked, staring at the precious crates. 50,000 credits per crate, Yoon-ji said. The buyer's gray skin turned pale. That's 10 times the old price. Supply and demand, Yoon-ji shrugged. There's no more supply coming from Earth, but demand is higher than ever. She was right. Across the galaxy, Beings who had grown up drinking human coffee were desperate for even a small taste. Restaurants that had served human food were closing because they couldn't get ingredients. Entire industries built around human products were collapsing. But the real problems were deeper than missing luxuries. Admiral Wanshik stood in the emergency command center, staring at a galaxy-wide map covered in red warning lights. Each light represented a system failure somewhere in space. "Report," he ordered. 17 shipping lanes are completely blocked by debris, his aide reported. The automated cleanup systems have stopped working. 23 mining operations have gone dark because their transport networks failed. And sir, we've lost contact with 3 entire star systems. Wanshik felt a chill run down his spine. Lost contact how? Their communication relays have stopped working. We think the quantum alignment systems need maintenance, but we don't have anyone who knows how to fix them. The Admiral looked at the map again. Red lights were spreading like a disease across the galaxy. Each light represented thousands or millions of beings who were cut off from the rest of civilization. "What about our own ships?" he asked. 40% of the fleet is grounded with technical problems," the aide said reluctantly. "The maintenance manuals assume human support staff. Without them, we can only do basic repairs." On the medical World of Healing Prime, Dr. Junho was facing his own crisis. The Universal Medical Database, which contained treatment information for hundreds of different species, was starting to show gaps. "The Vortani treatment protocols are corrupted," his assistant Nari reported. "Half the data is missing." "Senaro, we restore it? The backup systems require human-designed security codes. We can't access them." Junho sat down heavily. The medical database had been built over centuries of human research and cooperation with alien doctors. Humans had figured out how to make treatments work for different biologies, how to avoid dangerous drug interactions between species, how to prevent the spread of diseases that could jump from one type of being to another. Without that knowledge, medicine was becoming dangerous guesswork. "Doctor," Nari said, "we just received a priority message from the Outer Rim. There's been an outbreak of Rigelian fever on 3 worlds. The humans always handled quarantine procedures for that." "What are we supposed to do?" Junho asked. "I don't know," Nari admitted. "The protocols are encrypted with human safety codes." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on thousands of worlds. Systems that had worked perfectly for centuries were breaking down, not because they were badly designed, but because they had been designed to work with human oversight. The humans had been the invisible glue holding everything together. Captain Boram, a smuggler who worked the dangerous border regions, was one of the first to understand what was really happening. Her ship carried black market goods and information, which meant she went places most people avoided. "Look at this," she told her engineer, Sung Min, showing him a computer core they had salvaged from an abandoned human station. "What am I looking at?" "Integration protocols," Boram said. "The humans didn't just run the shipping networks. They translated between different alien technologies. See this? It's a bridge program that lets Vortani engines talk to Zilani navigation systems." Sung Min studied the code. "This is incredibly complex. How many different technologies is it managing?" 47 different types in this core alone, Boram said. "And this was just a small station. The big ones probably handled hundreds." The terrible truth was becoming clear. Aliens had built their own technologies, but humans had made them work together. Every ship, every station, every factory was actually a collection of different alien parts held together by human engineering. "Without this integration software," Sung Min said slowly, "most of our technology is just expensive junk." "Now you're getting it," Boram said. "And the humans took all their integration codes with them when they left." Back on Nexus Prime, the Emergency Council was meeting again, but this time, half the seats were empty. Some representatives couldn't travel because their ships were broken. Others were dealing with crises on their home worlds. Taeho looked around the nearly empty chamber. "How many worlds have reported major system failures?" 237, Do-hyun replied. His usually precise voice shook with fear. "And that's just the ones we can still contact." What about the human colonies? The ones they abandoned? Stripped clean, reported Minister Yanwu. They took everything. Equipment, data files, even the instruction manuals. It's like they were never there. Taeho stared at the empty chair where Heejin used to sit. She warned us this would happen. She said they were going to leave, Do-hyun said. She didn't say they were going to take civilization with them. Outside the crystal towers, the lights of Nexus Prime flickered as another power grid regulator failed. In the distance, ships sat motionless in the spaceport, waiting for repairs that might never come. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between using technology and understanding it. 1 year had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was falling apart faster than anyone had imagined. Dr. Sungmin sat in his small office on the academic world of new learning, staring at the most terrifying research report he had ever written. The Human Dependency Crisis: How We Built Everything on Borrowed Knowledge, he read the title aloud to himself. The numbers inside were even worse than he had feared. His assistant, Hyo-rin, knocked on his door. "Professor, the council is ready for your presentation." Sungmin picked up his datapad and walked to the conference room. Representatives from 12 different worlds sat around the table, though many more had been invited. The others couldn't travel anymore because their ships were broken. "Tell us the truth," said Governor Min-soo from the farming world of Greenfields. "How bad is it really?" Sungmin activated his holographic display. 17 sectors have lost all interstellar communication. 43% of all shipping has stopped. Manufacturing is down by 60%, and it's getting worse every day. "But surely we can learn to fix these things," said Admiral Yi-jun from the Orbital Defense Force. "That's what I thought too," Sungmin replied. "But the more we study human technology, the more we realize how complex it really was. They weren't just operating our systems. They were constantly fixing, updating, and improving them." He showed them a diagram of a typical space station. "This looks simple, right? But look closer. The Vortani power systems don't naturally work with Zilani computers. The Corvani shields can't communicate with Altarian sensors. Humans created thousands of small programs to make all these different technologies work together. So we just need to recreate those programs," Yi-jun said. "Each one took humans years to develop," Sungmin explained. "They had to understand how every alien technology worked, then figure out how to make them compatible. We're talking about 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge." The room fell silent as the representatives absorbed this information. On the border worlds, things were getting desperate. Commander Nari led a salvage team through the ruins of Checkpoint Station, one of the largest human facilities in the sector. Her soldiers searched through empty rooms looking for anything useful. "Ma'am," Sergeant Dongwoo called out. "Found something in the main computer core." Nari hurried over to look. The computer screen showed lines of code, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen. "This isn't just programming," her technical officer Junho said in amazement. "It's like a translation system for machines. Look, it's taking signals from Vortani engines and converting them into something Corvani navigation systems can understand. Can we copy it?" "I don't think so. It's connected to dozens of other systems. If we remove one part, the whole thing might stop working." Nari stared at the screen. So the humans didn't just run these stations. They were constantly maintaining compatibility between hundreds of different technologies. "More than that," Junho said. "Look at these update logs. They were fixing problems and making improvements every single day. Some of this code was modified just hours before they left." The medical crisis was getting worse too. On the hospital world of Mercy Station, Dr. Junho faced a nightmare scenario. 3 different plagues were spreading across the outer rim and he couldn't access the treatment protocols. "The Zilani virus database is completely locked," his colleague, Dr. Si-jin, reported. "It requires human medical clearance codes." "What about the emergency override?" "Also requires human authorization. They really didn't want anyone accessing this information without proper supervision." Junho understood why. The medical database contained information about biological weapons, dangerous research, and treatments that could be deadly if used incorrectly. Humans had been the guardians of galactic medical knowledge for good reason. How many people are going to die because we can't access our own medical records? Si-Jin asked. Too many, Junho replied grimly. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Factory Prime, chaos was spreading. Manufacturing plants that had worked perfectly for decades were shutting down one by one. Supervisor Kyung-soo walked through his factory, watching expensive machines turn into useless metal. The problem isn't just broken equipment, his engineer Tae-young explained. It's the whole system. Humans designed the production schedules, the supply chains, the quality control systems. Without them, we don't know what to make, when to make it, or how to get materials delivered. Can't we just make simple things? Kyung-soo asked. We tried, but even simple things require coordination between multiple factories. The humans managed all of that. They knew which factory could make which parts, how long each step would take, how to route materials efficiently. Kyung-soo looked out at his empty factory floor. So we're not just losing technology, we're losing the knowledge of how to organize civilization itself. The transportation crisis was perhaps the worst of all. Captain Yoonji, now one of the few remaining independent traders, witnessed the collapse of the galactic shipping network firsthand. Jump Gate 7 is completely dead, her navigator Wonho reported. That cuts off the entire Centauri sector. What about the backup routes? Also failing. The humans maintained the quantum resonance calibrations for the whole network. Without constant adjustments, the gates slowly drift out of alignment. Yoonji did a quick calculation. How long before the whole network shuts down? At the current rate? Maybe 2 more years. After that, it will take months to travel between systems instead of hours. The galaxy was about to become a very large and very lonely place. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from researcher Hyunwoo on the science world of deep knowledge. He had been studying the remains of human research facilities, trying to understand how their technology really worked. I found something terrible, he told his team. Every piece of technology we thought we invented, the humans modified it. His assistant, So Young, looked confused. What do you mean? Look at this Vortani engine design from 200 years ago. Hyunwoo showed them the blueprints. According to our records, it was a pure Vortani invention. But look at these maintenance logs. Humans made 1,700 small modifications over the years. Modifications for what? Safety improvements, efficiency upgrades, compatibility fixes. Without these changes, the original design would have exploded on first use. The team stared at the evidence in shock. Are you saying that our own technology doesn't actually work? So Young asked. I'm saying that humans spent 3 centuries secretly fixing our mistakes and making our inventions actually functional. We never created anything that worked properly on its own. The terrible truth was spreading across the galaxy. Every alien civilization had been living in a house built by humans, using tools improved by humans, following systems designed by humans. They had been children playing with toys while the adults made sure nothing broke, and now the adults were gone. On Nexus Prime, the remaining council members met in emergency session. But the beautiful crystal towers were dark now. The power grid, maintained by human engineers, was failing section by section. We need to send another message to Earth, Taeho said desperately. Offer them anything they want, complete control of the Federation, unlimited resources, whatever it takes. We've tried, Do-hyun replied. The only response is the same automated message. Earth is no longer accepting communications from galactic governments. Then what do? We learn to survive without them, said Minister Yeonwoo, though her voice lacked conviction. Or we don't. Outside the crystal towers, the lights of the once great city flickered and went out one by one. In the darkness, the remaining inhabitants wondered if their civilization would see another sunrise. The galaxy had always assumed that humans needed them. Now they were learning the opposite was true. 2 years after humanity's departure, the first official embassy fleet reached the edge of the Sol system. Ambassador Dong-woo commanded the expedition from the bridge of the Corvani flagship Peaceseeker. Behind him flew ships from every major, galactic power, loaded with gifts, treaties, and increasingly desperate offers. There it is, his navigator, Captain Subin, announced. The human home system. Dongwu stared at the main screen in amazement. The entire solar system was surrounded by a defensive grid unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive stations floated in perfect formation, connected by streams of energy that seemed to bend space itself. Human ships moved between them with impossible grace, their designs sleek and powerful beyond anything in the galactic fleet. "Those ships," Subin whispered. "They're moving faster than our sensors can track." "How is that possible?" "I don't know. The energy readings don't match any known technology." A communication signal reached their ship, clear and polite but absolutely firm. "This star system is under protective quarantine. Unauthorized vessels will be escorted to the boundary zone for your safety. Thank you for your understanding. This is Ambassador Dongwu of the Galactic Federation," he replied. "We request permission to speak with human government representatives about ending the withdrawal." "Please stand by," came the reply. They waited for 3 hours before a single, human ship approached their fleet. It was smaller than their flagship but radiated power that made their sensors overload. The human pilot identified herself as Captain Hisun. "Ambassador," Hisun's voice was calm and professional. "Earth appreciates your visit, but we are not currently accepting diplomatic contact with galactic governments." "Please," Dongwu said, letting desperation creep into his voice. "The galaxy is dying without human help. Entire civilizations are collapsing. Billions are suffering." "We are aware of the situation," Hisun replied. "We have been monitoring galactic communications. Then you know we need you to come back. What we know is that you never learned to be independent. This was always going to happen eventually." Dongwu activated his holographic display showing images of the galactic crisis. "Look at this. Whole world's going dark. Trade routes collapsing. People dying from diseases we can't treat. Yes, we see it. It's very sad. But coming back now would only make the problem worse." "How could helping us make things worse?" Hisun was quiet for a moment. "Because you would never learn to help yourselves. You would go back to depending on us for everything, and in another century we would have the same crisis all over again. We promise it will be different this time." "You promised equal partnership for 300 years, Hisun said. "But every time we tried to teach you how our systems worked, you told us to just keep fixing things for you instead." Back in galactic space, the situation was indeed desperate. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, Governor Minsu watched his planet slowly die. The atmospheric processors that kept the air breathable were failing, and nobody knew how to repair them. "The oxygen levels are dropping again," his environmental officer Jin Wu reported. "We've lost another processing station." "How long do we have?" "At this rate, maybe 6 months before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable." Minsu stared out at his dying world. 50 million people lived here, all dependent on technology they didn't understand. "What about evacuation?" "Most of the transport ships are broken," Jinwoo said sadly. "And even if they worked, where would we go? Half the habitable worlds in this sector are having the same problems." On the corporate world of Trade Central, CEO Sung-hee made an announcement that sent shockwaves through what remained of the galactic economy. Her massive industrial corporation, which had employed billions across hundreds of worlds, was shutting down completely. "We simply cannot function without human systems integration," she explained to the board of directors. "Our factories are scattered across the galaxy, but humans designed all the coordination systems. Without them, we can't manage production, shipping, or quality control on an interstellar scale." "What about our employees?" asked board member Hyun-jin. "Unemployed, I'm afraid, along with everyone else who worked for companies like ours." The unemployment crisis was staggering, not because aliens couldn't work, but because the jobs they had been doing required human-designed systems to coordinate. Without those systems, most large-scale economic activity was impossible. In the criminal underworld, however, business was booming. Smuggler Captain Boram had become one of the richest beings in the galaxy by trading in human artifacts. A single human computer core could buy a small planet. A crate of human medical supplies was worth an entire fleet of ships. The Altarian Republic is offering 10 million credits for a working human communication array, her partner Chulmin reported. And the Vortani Empire will pay 50 million for access to human agricultural data. Tempting, Boram said, but we need to be careful. Human technology is our only advantage right now. If we sell too much, we'll end up just as helpless as everyone else. She was right to be cautious. The few remaining pieces of human technology were becoming more valuable than entire star systems. Wars were being fought over the rights to salvage human facilities. Ancient enemies were forming desperate alliances to share the few working human systems they could find. The medical crisis had reached nightmare levels. Dr. Jun Ho stood in his empty hospital, watching patients die from diseases that should have been easily treatable. The human medical database remained locked, its security systems still active even though their creators were gone. We tried everything, his colleague Dr. Si Jin reported. Hacking, bribing former human staff, even hiring criminal data thieves. The security is unbreakable. So we just watch people die? Unless we can somehow convince the humans to give us the access codes. Junho looked out at the ward full of suffering patients. They must know this is happening. They must be able to see that beings are dying because we can't access medical information. Maybe they think we need to learn the hard way. The social collapse was as devastating as the technological failure. Without humans to serve as translators and mediators, ancient prejudices and cultural conflicts were resurging. Species that had lived together peacefully for centuries were now at each other's throats. Dr. Su Jin, a cultural anthropologist, published a disturbing report about the social breakdown. Humans weren't just managing our technology, she wrote. They were managing our relationships with each other. They understood how different species think and communicate. Without them, we're having trouble even talking to each other. It was true. Diplomatic meetings dissolved into confusion as aliens realized they had been relying on human cultural interpreters for centuries. Business negotiations failed because different species had fundamentally different ideas about contracts and agreements. Even simple conversations became difficult without humans to explain the subtle meanings behind alien gestures and expressions. Meanwhile, long-range sensors detected something disturbing beyond the Sol system's defensive barrier. Massive construction projects were underway in human space. Energy signatures showed technology that seemed to violate known physics. Whatever humans were building out there, it was beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. They're not just surviving, reported intelligence analyst Yon Ho. They're advancing. The energy readings suggest they've made breakthrough discoveries in faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, maybe even dimensional manipulation. While we're collapsing, they're becoming gods, Admiral Wanshik said bitterly. Back at the Sol system border, Ambassador Dongwu made one final plea. Name your price. Complete control of the Federation, voting rights on every world, access to all our resources. Just come back and help us. You're offering us what we already had, Captain Haisun replied. But you never offered us what we actually wanted. Which was what? Respect. Partnership. The chance to be treated as equals instead of universal servants. She paused. But most importantly, the knowledge that you could survive without us. Can't survive without you? That's what we're trying to tell you. Not yet, Haisun agreed. But you will learn, or you won't. Either way, it will be your choice. So you're just going to let billions die? We're going to let you grow up, Haisun said gently. It should have happened centuries ago. We enabled your dependence by always solving your problems for you. Now you need to learn to solve them yourselves. And if we can't, then perhaps the galaxy isn't ready for the kind of civilization we all dreamed of. As the human ship departed, Dongwu realized the crushing truth. Humanity wasn't coming back to save them. They were on their own in a galaxy they had never learned to manage. They would either rise to the challenge or watch everything they had built crumble to dust. The choice was theirs, and theirs alone. 3 years after humanity vanished from the galactic stage, Senator Yan Wu stood in what used to be the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Federation. Half the ceiling had collapsed from lack of maintenance, and most of the seats sat empty. The great crystal towers of Nexus Prime were dark, their power systems long since failed. Of the 50 worlds that once made up the Federation, only 12 still maintained regular contact. The rest had either gone silent or retreated into isolation, struggling to keep their own civilizations alive. "Status report," Yanwu called to the handful of representatives still present. Te-Ho, the Vortani ambassador whose scales had lost their bright color from stress, spoke first. "The Vortani Empire has split into 17 separate territories. Without human logistics coordination, we can't maintain control over our outer colonies." Do-Hyun, the small Zilani mathematician, added his own grim numbers. "The Zilani Confederacy exists only on paper now. 3/4 of our member worlds have stopped responding to communications." "What about military assets?" Yanwu asked. "Admiral?" Wonshik laughed bitterly. "The mighty Corvani defense fleet consists of 43 working ships. Everything else is grounded with maintenance problems we can't solve." The collapse had been faster and more complete than anyone had imagined. Without human coordination, the great galactic civilizations had simply fallen apart. It wasn't just technology that failed. It was the very idea of large-scale organization. On the research station Deep Knowledge, scientist Hyunwoo made a discovery that shook him to his core. He had been studying the remains of human facilities, trying to understand how their technology really worked. What he found was worse than anyone had suspected. "Come look at this," he called to his research partner, Dr. So Young. On his screen was a schematic of a Vortani starship engine, one of their most advanced designs. But overlaid on the original blueprint were thousands of tiny modifications in red ink. "These are human improvements," Hyunwoo explained. "Every single system on this ship has been secretly modified by human engineers over the past 2 centuries. "What kind of modifications?" "Safety improvements mostly. The original Vortani design would have exploded after about 10 hours of operation. Humans figured out how to make it stable without telling anyone." So Young stared at the screen in horror. "Are you saying our own technology doesn't actually work?" "Not the way we designed it, no. Look at this." He pulled up another schematic. "This is a Zilani computer core from 50 years ago. According to the original specs, it should have been able to handle basic calculations. But humans secretly upgraded the processing algorithms. Without their improvements, it's barely more capable than a simple calculator. How widespread is this?" Hyunwoo's voice was hollow. "Every piece of alien technology I've examined has human modifications. We never invented anything that worked properly. We just thought we did because humans were quietly fixing our mistakes." The social collapse was even more devastating than the technological failure. Dr. Su Jin, studying the breakdown of galactic civilization, published her final report before the academic networks shut down completely. "Humans weren't just our engineers and technicians," she wrote. "They were our diplomats, our mediators, our cultural interpreters. They understood how different species think and communicate better than we understood ourselves." It was true. Ancient prejudices that had been suppressed for centuries were rising to the surface. The Vortani had always considered themselves superior warriors, but they had cooperated with other species because humans helped them understand the benefits of peace. The Zilani had always been obsessed with mathematical perfection, but they had worked with less precise species because humans translated their concepts into understandable terms. Without humans to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking, the galaxy was fracturing along species lines. On the mining world of Deep Dig, Foreman Kyung-soo faced the reality that his entire industry was collapsing. The massive mining operation that fed raw materials to hundreds of worlds had been coordinated by human logistics experts. Without them, it was chaos. "We can't get the rare earth shipment to the Altarian Republic," his assistant Minho reported. "The shipping computer says we need 17 different authorizations, but half the officials it wants to contact are on worlds we can't reach anymore." "What about the Corvani fleet? They're desperate for titanium." "Same problem. The human trade protocols handled all the paperwork automatically. Now we have to do it manually and nobody knows how." Kyung-soo looked out at his vast mining operation. They were sitting on enough raw materials to supply the entire galaxy, but they couldn't get it to anyone who needed it. The transportation, banking, and legal systems required to move goods between worlds had all been managed by humans. So we just sit here with our wealth while people starve on other worlds? Unless someone figures out how to rebuild the entire galactic trade system. From scratch, Minho said. The medical crisis had reached apocalyptic levels. Dr. Junho stood in his empty hospital on Mercy Station, watching the last of his patients die from diseases that should have been easily preventable. The human medical database remained locked behind unbreakable security codes. The Regelian fever has reached the core worlds, his colleague Dr. Sijin reported. 12 billion people infected, and we still can't access the treatment protocols. What about the research facility on New Hope? The one that was studying the outbreak? Abandoned. The researchers couldn't access the human medical archives either, so they gave up and evacuated. Junho realized the terrible irony. Humans had locked away their medical knowledge to prevent it from being misused as biological weapons. But in trying to protect the galaxy from deliberate harm, they had made it impossible to treat accidental outbreaks. How many people are going to die because we can't access our own medical records? All of them eventually, Seijin said quietly. Without human epidemiologists monitoring disease patterns and updating treatment protocols, we're back to primitive medicine. The few remaining, functional governments were growing desperate. On the trade world of Commerce Prime, President Jinwoo announced a bounty that shocked everyone. 1 trillion credits for any working human computer core that contained medical, engineering, or logistics data. We will pay anything, he declared. In his broadcast to the remaining worlds. Sell us your planets, your fleets, your entire civilizations. Nothing is too valuable to trade for human knowledge. But even when governments found human artifacts, they discovered a new problem. Human technology was designed to work together as an integrated system. Individual components were often useless by themselves. Smuggler Captain Boram learned this the hard way when she tried to sell a human medical computer to the Altarian Republic. It's not working, the buyer complained. We installed it in our hospital, but it says it can't function without connection to the human medical network. Can't you just bypass that requirement? We tried. But the system is designed to constantly update its information from other human medical facilities. Without that network, it doesn't trust its own data. Boram realized the horrible truth. Human technology wasn't just advanced, it was interdependent. Every piece relied on connection to other pieces across the galaxy. When humans left, they didn't just take their equipment, they took the entire web of connections that made their technology useful. On the few worlds that were still functional, desperate experiments were underway. Teams of alien scientists worked around the clock, trying to reverse engineer human technology or find alternatives to human systems. Most of these efforts failed spectacularly. Engineer Tae Young led a project to rebuild the Kepler jump gate network, but every attempt resulted in dimensional tears that made space travel even more dangerous. We're missing something fundamental, he reported to his team. It's not just about the technology. Humans understood something about the nature of space and time that we don't. What do you mean? Look at these quantum calculations. Tae Young showed them screens full of complex mathematics. Human jump gate designs don't just move ships through space. They somehow smooth out the fabric of reality itself. Our attempts create instabilities because we don't understand the underlying physics. Similar failures were happening across the galaxy. Attempts to recreate human agricultural systems resulted in crop failures. Efforts to rebuild human communication networks created interference that made the problems worse. Projects to restore human manufacturing resulted in products that fell apart after a few days of use. It was becoming clear that humans hadn't just been more advanced. They had been thinking about technology in fundamentally different ways. But perhaps the most disturbing news came from long-range sensors monitoring the Sol system. The construction projects in human space were accelerating. Energy readings suggested they had achieved breakthrough discoveries that put them centuries ahead of the rest of the galaxy. They're not just rebuilding, intelligence analyst Yeon Ho reported to the Emergency Council. They're transcending. The energy signatures suggest they've solved problems we didn't even know existed. Like what? Faster than light communication without quantum entanglement. artificial gravity without rotation, matter conversion at the atomic level. Some of these readings suggest they might be